Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and in today's episode of Scoreboard, I'm joined in person on a fine Brisbane day on the, what are we today, Fletcher? The May the 1st. Fletcher Dyson, welcome.
Welcome, thank you very much, Chris. Long-time listener, first-time podcaster.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes.
I do appreciate the support. First-time podcaster.
First-time podcaster. You've got my cherry.
How are you feeling?
Bit nervous, actually.
Yeah,
bit nervous.
I'm ready for the hard questions.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan about talking about myself, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah, right. So as I said, May the 1st, beautiful day. What have you been up to? What have you been up to today, Fletcher?
Well, I had a little bit of an IT issue this morning, so I sat at the IT guys for 2 or 3 hours working out my new laptop. But and now I'm joining you. A beautiful day.
Yeah, and 2025. How's it started? How's the year been? Being now 4 months through, on the 5th month, yeah.
Well, I sold my business. I left, my last day was January 31st. I've painted the inside of my mum and dad's house. I've stained the decks. I've painted my house. So we're sort of 3 months in to that and getting a bit itchy to get back to work.
Now, the painting, cathartic, you enjoy it? Is it a little bit?
No.
Opposite.
Look, I now know why painters charge so much, because it's just one of the worst jobs in the world. And my right arm doesn't work too well, so I'm not very good at the ceiling. So, look, I managed to kind of made into giving me a contact to a painter who had a spray gun, and what would have taken me probably 2 weeks took me probably 2.5 hours.
Right, this
was brilliant.
The spray gun. It's a bit like the AI of the world, the chat GPT.
Do you know what? This guy, he was $65 an hour. He came with his own spray, and I bought the paint, obviously, and I just rolled in behind him, just rolled the walls in behind him. 2.5 hours, 5-bedroom house done.
Right, he could have charged $200 an hour.
Oh, he could have
tripled his price.
That's what they do, though, right? That's what they do, and that's why they have a very pleasant job in their own little world.
Now, the listeners out here will remember Fletcher Dyson. They'll go, the Wallaby, the rugby player. But you've retired for a long time now. What did you get up to post-rugby?
Post-rugby, I finished in 2004. I went and worked for Queensland Rugby Union and selling sport or selling the Reds. I was part of, I went and ran a pub for 6 months of my life, the Queen's Arms Hotel in the Valley.
The Queen's Arms, you ran the pub. This is pre what's his name? Chris
Handy.
Chris Condon. Chris Condon.
Yeah, no, it was actually the Oz Pub Group.
Chris Handy had some pubs as well.
Yeah,
Buddha's Tavern, remember that one?
Yeah. So I thought it was a nice fit
He had the one at Oxley as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
The bottle shop at Oxley?
Yeah, he did, yeah. So I did that for 6 months of my life and to get away from rugby. And then I went down, which was one of the best times of my life, I went down to the Rebels to set up the Australian Rugby Championship in Melbourne for the Rebels. And did that, sold that, came back and joined the orthopaedic landscape here in Queensland.
Wow. Okay, the orthopaedic landscape and ran a business in that field.
Well, I learned the craft, and it was very much a steep learning curve of culture and also language and being in theatre, running cases for on behalf of the surgeons, and this is on knee replacements, shoulder replacements, hip replacements, spine. So having a background of mine where it was just more injury happening, I had a very, very, very steep learning curve, and I did that for 6 years. And then I went out with my business partner and started up a orthopaedic company, which was an agency model, and has done that now for the past 10 years and got out in January.
And was that an opportunity you saw organically appear whilst you're in that business and thought, actually, if we do this a better way or do this a bit more efficient, we'll start our own business?
I think to be fair, it was a better way.
Yep.
I sort of learnt what not to do in the 6 years that I was at an employment. And when we got the opportunity to do our own thing, and I always wanted to do something for myself, and it's those late nights when you're driving home from Toowoomba or the Noosa, or it's actually money into your pocket rather than money into someone else's pocket. So you've sort of you're in charge of your own destiny. And I love that. And, the harder you work, the more money you make. And that was good. We did that for 10 years. And as I said, I sold out in January.
Speaking of money, going back to your career, when you were growing up, the game probably wasn't professional.
Yeah.
What, professional in 95, I think it was.
95, yeah.
And so you were playing at the highest level in 95?
No, I was sort of on the cusp. I think I signed my first contract in 98 with the Waratahs.
Yeah, for money, yeah.
Yeah, for money. Yeah. So I was working for the New South Wales Rugby Union. I was running the Central Coast or Gosford area for development. I think I was on $30,000 doing that, and I got a $30,000 Waratah contract. So, that was my first foray into professional sport.
But growing up, there was never any sort of real fascination with getting paid lots of money to play rugby.
No, I think back in the day, a polo shirt, tracksuit, and a good time on a Saturday night was pretty much the
What
payment.
about remember the Colorado shoes?
Yeah, the Colorado. Yeah. Well, if you go back, the chinos, the chambray shirt, and the Colorados, like there was nothing better. And look, that did well on a Saturday night. Nowadays, probably not so much. Maybe down the yacht club, but
and particularly if you had the corner post from Ballymore, when the full time everyone was scrambling to try and grab that corner post, right? That little.
Do you know? I don't know if you've set me up there, but I was at Ballymore. Australia played France in 95 or 94. I was being front row too slow. Jumped the fence. I paid $5 for the corner post. And I had it for years with my ticket taped to the corner post from that test match.
No, I didn't set you up on that.
Oh, that was just, to get something of memorabilia. I probably dragged that through my whole career because if it wasn't bolted down in a chain shed, it probably ended up in my bag. But, the corner post, I love that, yeah.
The chase. Yeah.
Oh, it was. And to hold something that you actually knew that you were there and being a part of, I think was cool.
Did you get up to some mischief behind the hill there, mate?
No.
Playing footy and fighting with your mates and all that sort of stuff.
No, well, I was lucky enough to exit out of Brisbane. I went to Armidale University straight from school, so I missed the Colts, that sort of frivolities on the hill.
On the hill, yeah, back in the days at Ballymore. Still going strong, Ballymore, by the way, as a stadium.
It's beautiful. I love it.
Rugby. Did you watch it as a kid? When did you first pick up a ball? How did you sort of get into it?
I was born in Victoria and I played AFL. I was a centre-half forward in the Eltham sort of district in Melbourne. And my parents moved to Queensland when I was 14 and I went to a local high school where I was growing up. And let's just say if I had stayed at the local high school, I was on the one-way ticket to the Wacol Juvenile Justice Centre. Mm-hmm. So I went to John Paul College down in Daisy Hill.
Yep.
And we were auditioning for the spot there at the school, and the master said to me, "Are you religious?" And we'd sort of not touched on that, Mum and Dad, and I sort of looked at them, and they said, the rugby master said, "Do you play rugby?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I will." And I was only a young kid. I was a little fat boy, and the thing that I love about rugby is that it's for all shapes and sizes. And for the first time, I suppose, in year 7 or 8, people sort of love the fact that I was a bigger kid. I used to get sort of picked on as a young fella. And I found rugby. I started off as a loose head prop and finished my career at tight head prop. So I made two jumps over. Yeah. Well, they say you wear your IQ on the back of your jersey. I went from 1 to 3.
That's probably the metres difference from the positioning as well, 1 to 3 metres range. So you John Paul College, the rugby coach, remember his name?
Tony Nutt was his name. Yeah. And he just said to me in the interview, "Are you religious? Do you play rugby?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll give that a go." And I think that my greatest tackle I ever performed was my first game for John Paul, and the opposing 5'8" was running out to drop the ball out from a 22 dropout, and I tackled him. One of the greatest tackles I've ever made.
Yep.
It was sort of a static tackle, but that was it. That was the start of the career.
And what did you enjoy about rugby at that point in time?
I think from the school point of view, it was either soccer or rugby, and
there are different terms now and different systems and things now.
Yeah. They've
It's
sort of mixed it all around,
yeah.
But it was black or white really, and so I decided rugby. I liked it because it was a game for all body shapes and sizes, and you could be a Ben Tune sitting out in the wind and be an absolute rock star, or you could be
combing your hair,
just making sure you look good for the penalties, or you could be in the middle of it all. And, no one sees the 1%ers that you do to create part of the teamwork to get the ball out to the Ben Tunes of the world. So I like that. I like that. That sport was good.
Did you ever have this sort of feeling like there was two teams? There was the forwards and the backs.
Only on a Saturday night there was the two teams. No, look, I think we used to love having the fly half part of the forward pack because they used to sort of promote you from your 22 down to their 22. So 9 and 10 were sort of surrogate forwards. And
then when you started playing rugby and you enjoyed it, right? When did you realise that you were pretty good at it?
I went to Armidale University and I saw a sign up for New England rugby, and it was under 19s. When you go to Armidale, when you play country rugby, I skipped the Colts side of things. So I actually was 17 playing against men.
Straight up.
There's
no
straight up.
In between divisions there.
No, so you're playing on a Saturday morning against Urella, and the scrum stinks of Bundaberg rum. And so, that's your sort of welcome to first grade
smell?
Yeah. I sort of got to like the smell after a little while. But I started making provincial sides. So to get through to the New South Wales under 19s, there's New England, Northern Province, New South Wales Country, and then you make the 19s, which I made my first year out of university, where the people in the city played for City, and then New South Wales.
Right.
So we used to drive from Armidale down to Maitland, down to Newcastle, and come back. And my dad used to drive me most of the time, so that was part of our little sort of father-son time. But as I kept going, I sort of kept making these teams, and that was sort of the springboard really into rugby. I did that 90, left school in 90, so 91, 92, 93. And then in 94, I got the opportunity to go to Sydney and play for North's Rugby down there and be a development officer in that grassroots area of North Sydney.
So you made New South Wales 19s, right?
Yep, 2 years. Yep,
2 years. Who was in that team?
There'd be Owen Finnegan, Stu Pinkerton. There's only a few guys that sort of came through with me. In the under 19s, there was George Gregan, Paddy Howard, and Brendan Cannon. So there was a real sort of pedigree coming through. That was in my second year of 19s. But you sort of look at the photographs and, there's one or two guys there that you've been all the way through the journey on with.
And rugby was pretty strong back then, wasn't it?
Rugby was so strong. Like we used to,
the World Cup.
Used to watch the great Gordon Bray on ABC.
Oh, yes.
The match of the round, it was, Randwick and Easts.
Yep.
And there was a big, hoo-ha about it. And listening to The Voice, Gordon Bray commentate, at university we'd sit around and watch it.
And then 91 World Cup, and then 95 World Cup in South Africa, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
All around that time. Now, when you were picked in the 19s, did you think that, actually there's a shot here to play at the higher level, or was it more like I'm 19 and I'm just it's okay?
I think it was cool to go back to Armidale University. I was in Wright College. It was cool to go back to be a somebody. You'd been away, 19s, you got the tracksuit, you got the jersey, the socks, and I'm anyone who knows me knows that I love my merch. But it was cool, and I think it just sort of morphed into next year, next game. In the 21s came around, New South Wales 21s, AIS Institute of Sport scholarship, I suppose, down there. And it just sort of grew and grew and grew. And I think the only time it sort of dawned on me was when I sort of joined the Waratahs, really. And that was by mistake, to be fair. My first contract or my first opportunity with the Waratahs was I got into trouble. I stole out of the pigeonhole Richard Harry's one-on-one videotape. The sky look at him running around the SFS.
Because was it a VHS?
The VHS, because they used to
a foreign object to our kids.
Well, very much so. Something that looks like a tape deck, but a big one. And I took it because I wanted to see what they were looking for the selectors and the next level, what they were looking for. And I was working for the Waratahs at the time, and the coach, Matt Williams, said to me, like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I've missed out on all these A programs, the Waratah A's and all the rest of it, and I wanted to find out what it takes to be the next level. And I had a good chat with Matt. And then it was that Sunday night after Friday, I think I got into trouble for taking it. You know, he rang me up and he said, look, I've spoken to your manager, Andrew Blades, who was the great Wallaby tight head prop and also Waratah. Is crook, and you know we're going to have you for the week, and you're going to come train with us. And I thought, yeah, bloody ripper. So I trained the whole week, and it was the week leading into an Auckland game at Eden Park, and I'd trained the entire week. And Matt Williams came up to me on the Thursday and said, look, we've pulled a few strings because you're part of the New South Wales Rugby Union development. We're going to actually bring you across to New Zealand with us, so you can really sort of feel part of the team. So I went across with them, got my blazer, which was a bit of merch, and we did the captain's run.
Sign a few autographs.
Oh, no, yeah. We did the captain's run at Eden Park, and, you know, I still remember the day. There's a big sign outside of Eden Park, and it's gone now, but 8 men in the shove, 8 men in the scrum, 40,000 in the shove, which sort of dawned on me that it was Ollo Brown, Sean Fitzpatrick and Craig Dowd, like 3 All Black royalty with the front row. Anyway, Saturday morning rolled around, and Matt Williams came into. I was rooming with Chris Whittaker at that time, and he said, you know, Fletch, he gave Chris Whittaker all the game plan that he wanted from the day. And he said to me, Fletch, I've got some good news and bad news. And I said, oh, what would you like first? I said, oh, the bad news, if you don't mind. He said, well, the bad news is Michael Bryle, who's the captain of the Waratahs at the time, he's crook. The good news is we're going to put you on the bench. So, you know, I was 26, scared.
So kind of almost late though, like in terms of your career.
Well,
like,
yeah,
know,
but
nowadays,
back in those days,
nowadays.
Nowadays you're 23, 24, 22. You know, these guys at prop, tight head prop, loose head prop, hooker, making their debuts. Back in, you know, in late 90s, you were 27, 28, 29 at your prime. You know, like you'd had 8 or 9 years of first grade in Sydney preparation.
Then a Super 8 or 10, whatever it was then. When did you start? What was it, Super?
Oh, look, I think it might have been Super 8s.
Super 8s, yeah. Yep.
Super 9s. So anyway, you know, I wake up and I sat on the bench for the entirety. I went to the bathroom about 20 times during the game.
Just to vomit?
Oh, no, I was scared, shitless. And anyway, you know, that was pretty much the start of my career, and it was all by default. It was all by me wanting to know how to be a better person or a better rugby player. And then from that, I got my first contract with the Waratahs.
By mistake?
By mistake.
Entrepreneurialism,
well,
you call it?
I'd like to call it entrepreneurial. Yeah. I thought to myself, well,
thinking outside the square.
Well, if no one's going to give it to you, you've got to go and grab it, don't you?
And the first game then, let's put it on. When you get on the field, was it off the bench or did you start?
Yeah, so Waratah's first game was start, and they used to have, I forget what they call it, was just the precursor to Southern States or whatever. We used to play the Brumbies, Reds, Canterbury and Auckland. And my first game was with Richard Harry, Mark Crick, and myself, and you know I had John Wellborn behind me in the second row, and with guys like that and the likes of Ealsey and that who just push, you could do no wrong. So, and then I played 8 games in 2 years for the Tars. There was plenty of times where I'd turn up to the SFS in Sydney and I'd get the tap on the shoulder, Bladesy's right tonight, so up in the stands I'd go. But you'd get to the point where you'd be warming up and you'd either be on or off, you'd go. So, did
you have any moments during the week where you thought, I'm definitely not playing, I'll just be a ratbag and then get called up?
I never be a ratbag. Never ever be a ratbag. Never ever, because if you that day that you're a ratbag,
you'll get called
up, and then you're sitting there ill prepared, mentally not prepared. That's your shot.
Yeah, right.
And that's the sliding doors of life.
Yep. And playing for the Waratahs, having gone to John Paul College and born in Melbourne, was there any kind of loyalty on teams that you wanted to play for when you were a kid, or was it sort of like I'm playing rugby?
I just wanted to play rugby. Yeah. Like obviously, I always wanted to play. I went from Norths, after Norths rugby in Sydney, I went and played at Randwick because I was going to give the game away because I'd just had enough of rugby. Randwick, I fell back in love with rugby. The Waratahs, I think we've all done bad things in our lives to get where we need to be or want to be. There
might be a lot of Waratah listeners out there.
Well, there could be, there might be. And look, all my time in the Waratahs was fantastic. But I just had this longing to get home to Queensland. I wasn't born and bred, but I felt in my heart I was a Queenslander. And I just wanted to get back, and through the development officer with New South Wales Rugby, I used to deal a lot with the Queensland guys, and we'd go away and do development camps and things like that. And they always used to laugh and joke, and like, we're going to get you home, we'll get you back to Brisbane. And it was a game for New South Wales country against Queensland in a trial match. I scored 2 tries. They weren't stunning. They were off the back of a line out at 6.
Doesn't happen often, though.
Drove over the line and fell down twice. And I'd propped against Dan Crowley and Michael Foley. And Knuckles, or John Connolly, called me a week afterwards and said, look, I'd been speaking to Foles, and he said that you went really well. We'd like to bring you back to Queensland. And I said, oh, Knuckles, that's very kind of you, and let me just check it on with my fiancée at that time, Amanda. And so I went home. I said, Mandy, pack your bags. We're off to Queensland. I've got a 3-year deal. And one of the nice things about Knuckles is that he backs those who backs themselves. And there were 2 deals on the table. There was deal A was a low base with a high incentive, or deal B was a high base with a low incentive. And mind you, there was in the squad Andrew Heath, Glenn Panaho, Dan Crowley, Nick Stiles, and myself. So I went, I thought, bugger this, like, I'm going to go low base, high incentive, I'm going to back myself. And it was only 2 or 3 years after I'd sort of finished playing with the Reds is that the then manager, Brian Thorburn, came up and said, this is why Knuckles backed you, because you backed yourself.
Yeah, right.
So there was some rough times in those 4 years with the Reds, as in performance-wise, but he stuck by me because I backed myself.
Some of the athletes have talked about the importance of a good coach, and I mean, it's subjective, obviously, but people like Wayne Bennett and Alex Ferguson and Lee Matthews, etc. Can you talk about your coaches and the importance of one that you connected really well with?
Yeah, look, I love. I'm a hugger. I like being hugged, and I don't like being yelled at. I don't like being, ordered.
Yeah.
So Knuckles to me was great. He was a fantastic mentor. Alec Evans was another mentor that I just loved being around. It was
seems like a lot of people have been mentored by Alec, by the way.
Oh, look, Alec Evans, I owe he and Knuckles my first Wallaby jersey, to be fair. They're just fantastic blokes. Rugby was in their heart, their head, and everything they touched. As long as you put the work in, they were there at the end. And Alec was fantastic for me. Andrew Slack was another great coach that I loved because, you'd be walking off, you'd feel a bit down, and he just had that emotional intelligence to sort of put an arm around you and, matey, you're right. And they're the Wayne Bennetts of the world where, speaking to Wendell Saylor about Wayne Bennett, you'd run through a brick wall for the guy. And by his own admission, he's not a great coach, but he's just a great man manager. And those coaches throughout my career that got the best out of me were the ones who took the time to work out who I was. So
really honed in on your own individual, because there's 15 different players 30 different players in the squad.
Yeah.
But know a little bit about how you react, how to get the best out of you individually, as opposed to a broad-based brush, I suppose.
Absolutely. And
everyone go for a lap, do this, do that. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to, more like, actually, Fletch, I'm watching you, and you keep going. Yeah,
an absolute bespoke approach to man management. And you take that into the business world. Everything you've learned there, you tap into the business world, and you get the best out of people. The Reds or the Wallabies or professional sports people, they're there at the top of the tree because they're good. It's the good coaches that can actually tap in to make them better. And those coaches, as I said, Jeff Miller was another one. They were great, because they actually took the time out to understand the player. Now, I don't know how it goes this day and age with such a transient population, but you take 5 or 10 minutes out to find out who the player is, you'll get 10 times out of them, 10 times effort. And
the era that you played, mental health wasn't as prominent as it is now in terms of keeping your head right. And do you remember aspects of that, I suppose, as a player and things not going your way, and you're skillful enough and you know that you've done the reps, but then things just don't add up a little bit in your head? Yeah,
look, I mean, everyone goes through their dips. It was a time where I sort of not hit rock bottom, but the doctor at the Reds, Greg Smith, and we went for a walk. We're in Canberra. We went to the Blue Poles, and it just sticks in my mind because it's just because mental health back then, it wasn't top of mind of people, and again, those people in your life that actually take the time out to understand who you are and how you tick, I mean, they're the ones you want in your corner. And Smithy just sort of understood where I was mentally in some of those sort of times. And as I said, no one's there to cradle you when you're feeling like that. But, he just had a sense that I needed to have a little bit of a spell, and we had a chat, and it was good, and you feel cathartic because you feel good about it. You can talk to people, and it's only in the last, 5-10 years where it's become part of conversation, and it's great.
The progression forward in terms of transparency.
Awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. And no one, as a bloke, you don't have to sit behind and go, oh, God, this is a sign of weakness, and it's brilliant. You can have a chat about it, and you can check in on your mates to make sure they're okay. So it's sort of gone a bit full circle.
The call up to the Wallabies back then, how did that happen? Was it an email? It wasn't an email, was it? Would it have been? Would it have been a phone
by telex.
By telex or a fax machine? A letter? A formal letter?
Rod McQueen. McQueen called me.
On your mobile?
Yep, on my mobile.
Did you have his number?
No, it came through as a no ID, caller ID.
It's just, back in the day, there's probably not scam calls.
There wasn't scam calls. There wasn't some call centre calling you. And it was Rod McQueen, sorry. And look, I got a bit of an inkling from Knuckles and Alec Evans around that you'll be getting a call, and nothing happens until you get the call. And Patricio Noriega was crook. Again, a little bit defaultish. I mean, I'd earned my right to be there.
Fletcher, yeah?
Hey?
You make your own luck.
Well, absolutely. Hard work brings good luck. And I thought to myself, well, this is my time. So I went up to Caloundra, where the Wallabies were based, and it was first day, and it was merch day. You walk around with a big bag and just fill it up with Mizunos and tracksuits, and it was brilliant.
You're like, I'm making the most of this.
I did. I made the most of it. And then first training, I got to meet Steve Nance for the first training session, and my God, he just obliterated everybody, just blew everyone off the park. We got absolutely spanked. And I thought to myself, here I am, Wallabies.
Yep. And then the first game?
Against Argentina at Ballymore, which was the last test match.
Which would have been a little bit bittersweet for Patricia not playing.
Don't care.
Yeah.
So 2000 at Ballymore, which was the last test match to ever be played there.
You played in the last test match at Ballymore.
Yeah, and we won 53-3. And Freddie Mendez was the hooker for the Argentinians. I remember on a 50-metre scrum. I remember the game going like that. It was just a blur. But 50-metre scrum, he decided to start headbutting me just to welcome the young fella in. And I unleashed a little bit of fury. Daniel Herbert had scored under the posts. The referee brought it back, penalised me, gave me a little talking to, gave Argentina a penalty. But after the game, Rod McQueen sat down with Michael Foley and just said, what's going on, what was going on? And he said, well, the old bloke was testing the young guy. What did you want him to do, back down? And so then McQueen came over to me and put his hand on my shoulder and he said, you've done well tonight, son. Well done. So
So he was happy, but Daniel Herbert was not.
Well, he might have hurt Herbie's sort of try.
And potentially could have been the last ever try as a Wallaby at Ballymore.
At Ballymore, yeah.
And
I turned that around nicely, Chris. Nice. Thank you. I feel bad now.
Are you
Sorry,
still
Herbie.
friends with Danny?
Yeah, Herbie's a nice guy. One of the nice guys.
But then you played in some absolute rippers as a Wallaby, and your first ever game against New Zealand.
Stadium Australia 2000. I was listening to Sterling Mortlock talk about the same thing. He and I debuted in that first game together against Argentina, funnily enough. But that game at Stadium Australia, still a world record crowd, set up for the Olympics, 24-0 after not long. And I thought to myself, this is going to be my international career done and dusted. This is the All Blacks. But turned out to be one of the greatest test matches ever played. And I was part of that, lucky to be part of it. Even down to the haka, Carl Hoft, who was the gentleman that I was up against. The haka, he just looked into my soul. He did not break eye contact all the way through. And I sort of knew myself like we're in for it tonight. But I learned a lot about myself that night as well. You know, when you're down 24 points after, 5-8 minutes, and you've got Ealesy, one of the greatest sporting leaders I've ever read about, been a part of and sort of been with, just cool as a cucumber. No swearing, just down under the goalposts, getting back to our process, the accountability, what we were going to do to get back, and I think at halftime we're 24.
Yeah, 24 all, wasn't it?
Yep.
I think what was the final score, like 39, 38 or something?
Oh, I think it was 32-35, I think.
With Lomu and the right.
Jonah Lomu, he 6'3", 118 kilos. I used to sort of not giggle, but wingers don't tackle, and especially up against Jonah Lomu. George Gregan had it down pat. He used to liken it to putting a stick through the spoke of a wheel. So if he could get himself in between Jonah's legs, you sort of could bring him down if you weren't chopped in half.
Yeah.
But 30 seconds to go, he broke down the sideline, tiptoed down the sideline, came around and put the ball down.
Just the classic Australia, New Zealand, All Black matches that have happened around that era.
Around that era, it was 1 point, 2 points. There was not much in it, and just the mental belief, I suppose, dragged us through that game. And then we backed it up in Wellington. I think it was about a week later.
Again, down to the wire.
Yeah.
And the All Blacks, obviously the culture, the legacy from 2002 onwards, 23 years, winning the Bledisloe. What was so special about playing against them? Was there something a little bit higher than playing them against other nations?
Well, to be really honest, I looked up to them. They're the All Blacks, and for years, you sort of grew up watching Australia and New Zealand, but actually to be playing against that black jersey was just mind blowing. And then, it desensitised a little bit because you played them pretty much week to week against Otago or Auckland, etc. But when they got that black jersey on, they just became a different beast. So to go out there to get the haka performed in front, it was a special moment, special times.
Now, your rugby career came to a bit of an abrupt end, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It wasn't planned. No. Do you want to talk about that? And I suppose during the sort of latter stages of experience in rugby, was there anything in the back of your mind saying, well, this can't last forever, I've got an interest out there to do something else as well?
Yeah, look, my career finished in 2004. It finished on the training fields in Clearwater in Christchurch. Prior to it, we were touring or leaving that day to go down to Otago, sorry. I dislocated my neck, so what they call a bilateral facet dislocation. So it's C6 and 7, which is the base of your neck, and I had a spinal cord that sort of went up, jilted left, and then up again. So spinal cords sort of have a velocity of a banana, a viscosity of like a banana. So I had a huge issue there. Obviously, I had bilateral pins and needles and nerve damage and anyway. But I think the 200 kilo sort of shrugs that I used to do sort of kept the neck on the shoulders, and it's what probably kept me from a wheelchair, to be fair, because I came within an eyelash of sitting down for the rest of my life. And so I went from Christchurch, Sydney, Brisbane, no neck brace, no X-ray, came back, did it Tuesday morning, I think it was 10:45 or 10:15, and I had an MRI at Brisbane Private on the Thursday. All the bells and whistles went off when I was in the MRI machine. The guy came over the speaker and said, "Mr. Dyson, when you come out, please don't move." And so they came out, they sandbagged my head to my neck, and they told me that I'd dislocated my neck. So, and it was quite a time.
The words dislocated your neck at the time, are you thinking, is this not only potentially the end of my rugby career, but also the fact that I might not ever walk again?
Well, that's it. And who I love to bits, my surgeon, Richard Williams, came down from upstairs, and I told him about the story from the last 48 hours of what I'd done, bag on and off carousel, to and from, putting a belt around my belt loop, lying down in the airport in Sydney because I couldn't stand up properly, walking like a drunk. And he just looked
airports
at me.
Are probably not so good for that, are they?
Well, no, because you've got to go through and take your belt off.
And and then that actual motion of taking your belt off, yeah.
But my hands started, then they didn't work. Yeah. They were all clawing up. I couldn't wipe my nose. My body was just in shock and just shutting down. And I told Richard that when I was lying there with the sandbags, and he said to me, he usually goes, and these were his words, and I remember them like yesterday, I usually going from a scanning room, looking at a scan like you, into greeting a quadriplegic. And he said, what you've just told me then, you'd have to be one of the luckiest blokes to ever be on the planet. And with that, he grabbed my hand. I went up, I sat up on the side of the bed. My head was over my shoulders, so it was actually, you could see that it sort of moved. And he said to me that night we were going to go in, or he was going to go in, relocate my head back onto my shoulders and reposition C6 and C7, take a bit of hip bone and put it in my neck with a titanium plate if it went well. If not, it was going to be from behind, so you'd have screws and rods. And then, I had Mandy and my 9-month-old Lucy in the corner watching and listening to this. And then he talked about the percentage risks of quadriplegia, paraplegic, loss of everything. So it was quite a confronting moment, but it was one of those moments in life where you just want it done. You don't worry about the process. You just want it done. And I remember,
I know all the risks. Give me all the risks. It doesn't really matter.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Because
it's not going to change.
So you can't control
the
percentages and things.
No way.
Yeah.
So I came out, and I remember it again. I was in recovery, and he came over and he said, I was dazed, and said everything had gone well. Can you wiggle your toes? And I wiggled my toes and my fingers. And I remember saying to him, front or back? And he said front, and I gave him the thumbs up, and then that was it. I was in hospital for another 2 days and got discharged. And
that's incredible.
I asked him, could I play again? And he said, I wouldn't buy a lotto ticket again, he said. So I took that and I thought, well, there you go. That's it. That's it. Not everyone gets a ticker tape parade in this world. And that was mine.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And then from that, the emotional, mental, I suppose, the load, you're not playing rugby anymore. How did you go that first year or so?
Not good.
Yeah.
Not good.
Something's taken away from your love, right?
When it's taken away from you, I couldn't watch rugby for another 5 or 6 years. I could not do it because the guys that I was playing with were still playing. They were still current. And, I'd gone from $250,000 a year on a pedestal, playing the game that I loved, to nothing. I was my contract.
Watching all these blokes run out there, walk and run, and you're going, I can't do that.
Yeah. And I immersed myself. I did a bit of speaking for Spinal Injuries Association, and I remember talking to the CEO about my injury, and he said, "Oh, look, we get a lot of quadriplegics in there with the same injury, and that they'll put their leg up against the radiator and have 3rd-degree burns because they can't feel their legs. I couldn't feel the top of my index finger, and I met a guy who did exactly what I did. So bilateral facet dislocation, hopping out of a spa bath, and he was in a wheelchair. So that whole survivor guilt that I had afterwards was messing with my head as well. But it was probably a good 5 or 6 years before I actually went back and watched rugby, because it hurt, it hurt a lot not being a part of it. And as I said, not everyone gets a ticker tape parade, but not everyone also gets a titanium plate and a bit of hip bone in their neck after it all.
And from that, it hasn't restricted you to jump on a bike.
No. It gave me Tourette's. I have a bad case of Tourette's. I swear a lot. I've got a doctor's certificate to... Well,
there's some early age listeners that listen to this podcast, but not mostly people are in their 40s that listen to this podcast, so feel free to swear away. It's only at school, at kids' sport now. I went on probably 4 or 5 years post my operation. I'm not allowed to go on roller coasters and things like that, but I remember doing the old Defiant thing. I was down at Movie World and I went on that Superman ride. My wife, Mandy, was, you can't go on this. I was like, I'm going to go. I'll choose this, thanks. And I went. So there's those small little bits and pieces. I remember being at the top of Threadbow at Crow's Nest, and I probably had a few Crown Lagers too many, and I thought, you know what, I'm going straight down. So I had that sort of... The body's relaxed.
And if we hit something, we're going to be good. So, but over time, you sort of get used to...
Yeah, but you've also done some very long bike rides, and for a good charity as well.
Yeah, so involved with motor neuron disease, so M&D and me. We've done, we went to New York Marathon 2015.
So, sorry, just touching back, look, 2015 New York Marathon.
Yeah.
And when was the injury?
2004.
2004. So
11 years, yeah.
11 years later, on that bed, when they said you've got a broken neck.
Yeah.
11 years later, you reckon you'd be running a New York Marathon?
No way.
It's incredible.
No way. Going backwards, I couldn't get myself out of a bath because all my triceps and biceps and strength had gone. I dropped 4 suit sizes in a month. It just went like that. So fast forward 11 years, my wife and I were part of the charity. We did the New York Marathon. The charity itself raised $250,000 for a non-sexy disease.
It's horrible.
No one. There's no good outcome from it.
Yep. There's no good outcome and no rhyme or reason.
No. I had a good mate of mine who was 42, diagnosed.
Even the rugby youth vendor has ours.
Yep. Horrible. My mate had to go home, tell his wife, 2 kids, 27 months. Yep. That's it. Thanks. On average.
For no, didn't smoke too much, drink too much, all this sort of stuff. There's nothing. There's no kind of it's just a...
Yep. Your card.
Your card, yeah.
So we did that, which was awesome. I've ridden from Brisbane to Sydney, 1,000k for motor neuron disease, which was brilliant. Townsville to Brisbane, which is 1,500 or so, 1,700. So done some good stuff, and I think you sort of I attack that because you get one shot at life, and not that I suppose I had a little bit of adversity back then with the neck, but you sort of get to see life with a little bit of different perspective, and you see these people with motor neuron disease, and you think, well, I'll hop on a bike seat for a week, and I will do that, and I will raise money and awareness, because that's the thing you got to do.
Yep. Rugby, as it currently stands, is going through a bit of a rough patch, and would have been 10 years ago when there was a spate of young kids getting injured in rugby, and it sort of really kind of shoved the punch in the stomach for rugby at that time in terms of injuries and things, and bigger kids and weight for age, etc. What's your view on rugby now? Oh, look,
I understand that we went through that spate. I went up to visit one of the guys at the PA, and it was confronting again to see that sort of stuff. I think that the scrum laws have changed a lot over time. I think there's got to be more awareness around front row play. Especially in scrums, because we're a unique game. As I said before,
different sizes. Yeah,
we're all unique body shapes and sizes. So, unfortunately, there's a stigma around front row and scrums, and that, you don't want to put people or kids into bad environments where they're at risk. So proper teaching, coaching, like I love coaching front rowers, because you can sort of start to teach them what not to do, or tell them what not to do, and how to do, and how to get yourself out of trouble. Look, I think rugby will always have those the scrum engagements, because that's what the game is. And I think if we don't do that, we sort of go a bit more of a league mentality. I mean, we've got a flatline defence at the moment, flatline attack. We have something that caters for our body shapes and sizes.
Yep, no, I 100% agree. Scoreboard moment. It's a moment in your life where there's probably like a Kodak moment. Actually, we're seeking sponsors for this section. I've said that a few times now, if there's any corporates out there listening for this, because it's such a powerful segment. One moment in your life, and it might already be in the moment we've covered, but I'm going to ask you about your Scoreboard moment.
I think, Chris, we've spoken about it briefly, but that 2000 game, or year 2000 against the All Blacks, Stadium Australia, underneath the goalpost there with Ealesy talking about it, I learned so much about accountability, discipline, resilience, all wrapped up in about a 20-minute live instructional video of life. 24-0 to 24-all. Absolutely. And you know what? At the end of that night, honestly, I still think we won that game because of the resilience shown. And you only have to pull that in to mimic life. I got a great quote, and I love it. And it's: the true measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in moments of challenge and controversy. That's a Dr. Martin Luther King, and I live my life by it. I love it. If I had a big enough arm, I'd tattoo it. But that night, I learnt who I was, and I watched 15 other blokes also look themselves in the eye as well. It was great.
Mm. And then on that, your favourite all-time sporting moment?
Oh, my all-time sporting moment. It's a tough.
That was the wrong side of the ledger at the end of the day for that particular game, but the following week was pretty up there with one of the great moments.
Well, one of the greatest. You segue nicely. Ealesy looking around for Sterling Mortlock. Now, I love Sterling very much, but he couldn't hit the side of a barn that day, and from a foot away.
He'd probably admit it too.
Well, he probably would, because he's a good guy. But Ealesy just had the ball and slotted this pill over the goals. I remember Craig Dowd gave the penalty away with 30 seconds to go. Ealesy slots it. My greatest regret was also in that game, because I went and hugged him around the hips, and there's a forever photograph of Richard Harry on my back celebrating, and now I tell my kids that's my legs, that's my ass, that's my...
You're in the frame.
I'm immortalised in that. So that probably would be... And knowing what we'd been through the week before, that's probably one of my highlights. And I was a part of it, but watching history being made and drinking from that cup was... The
last time, by the way.
Last time.
23
Interesting, though, that day, my dad was in the crowd, and for some unknown reason, and I don't know how he did it, he talked his way from the top of the grandstand down into the Wallaby chain shed, drunk out of the Bledisloe, and he said, "I'll leave you alone now," and walked off. I don't know how he did it.
Mate, that's got to be your Scoreboard moment.
That was brilliant, because he got to touch it, got to feel it, and you go back all the way back to Armidale, where he used to come down and pick me up and drive me to Maitland and all the rest of it. That's the world turned beautifully, and for me, that's one of my greatest moments.
One final question, and just on that, the parenting relationship with kids. I've got kids playing sport, and things are changing, and all this sort of stuff. What? Some advice to a younger Fletcher now in 2025 who's 14 or 15 playing rugby or playing whatever to try and be a professional athlete?
Oh, look, I tell my daughter, who plays hockey she's under 16 Queensland, she's a goalie. I tell her, just enjoy it. Go out there, enjoy it. Don't take no for an answer. That's another one. If you've got a dream big, and write it down. Write it down so it's tangible.
Did you write yours down?
Oh, look, I didn't, but I sort of...
In hindsight.
Yeah, like I just knew where I wanted to be. Like it was that sort of concrete in my head. I knew where I wanted to be. But, I love watching the young kids succeed, because the euphoria that I felt, I want these kids to feel it as well, because it's awesome. Like it's an awesome feeling to run out for your country, run out for your state, your club, because tomorrow it's done. And I know that for a fact. Tomorrow you don't play anymore. So you've got to play your game like it's your last. And it's a cliche that's been thrown around for years, but you got to. And you got to enjoy it. And you got to have good friends to surround yourself with, and get out there. And I always say to Sammy, my daughter, with representative stuff, be a pen, not a pencil. Be a pen, be the best you can be, so no one has any argument over your next selection or your game or whatever. You be a pencil, you can be rubbed out pretty quickly.
What about the specialisation of sport at a young age these days? It seems to me some of these kids are getting sort of a narrow vision about one sport at the age of 12, 13, and that's kind of it.
Look, again, I mean, I love to see kids play multiple sports, but it then comes down to the financials these days.
It's very expensive to
play. Look, we're playing hockey. It's the most expensive amateur sport I think you can almost do, apart from equestrian. But I think if you love it, do it. Doesn't matter if you do 3 things, 4 things, 5 things. If you love what you do, you'll do well at it. And one day you'll be either tapped on the shoulder to say you need to specialise now, or you keep going.
And when people hear the word Fletcher Dyson, they think of a rugby player, they think of played provincial, played for the Wallabies, played in some of these great games. What do you want people to remember Fletcher Dyson by?
Oh, just to be a nice guy, a nice bloke, a fun-loving, generous. They're the things that I'd love to have on my epitaph one day, is that, I just love doing what I do. I love being with the people I'm with. It's brilliant.
Fletcher, thank you so much for being on Scoreboard, the podcast today, and sharing your views from when you were a youth to then putting on that Wallaby jersey and playing some of those all-time great games to then the next phase of your life, which is now started your business, sold your business, and then now for the next phase of your journey. I wish you all the best and looking forward to catching up and following your progress.
Thanks very much, Chris. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you me being on the show. Thanks.